Hello and welcome to part 2 of the flat pack stool. In this video we're going to assemble our parts together and I'm going to show you how to do that. So we've already created our parts in our part studio. You can see there are 3 parts there. I've actually moved into the assembly now, just down the bottom here, and here is where we're going to assemble our parts. So the first thing we need to do is insert all our parts. So let's go ahead and insert. Now I'm going to need 1 part 1, and then 2 part 2s, and 2 part 3s. And we just put them on the screen like so. Hit the tick when you're happy with that. Now I'm going to leave part 1 to the side here. We're going to deal with it later. I'm actually just going to use just these 2 for now. Okay. Now I have experimented with a few different mates here. Mating these together with the slots does enable you to get them to slide in and out. However, I think probably the better option is to just fasten them together, just because there are some problems with sliding the mates together. But before we mate these together, I'm actually going to turn one of them to be facing upright so that it sort of makes it easier to understand where all the parts are going to go together. So let's just click this guy first. And let's turn him up 90 degrees and just move him up onto the screen there. That makes it a bit easier to slot the rest through. The others will adjust to fit this guy. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and we're going to use a fasten mate. You could use other mates here to slot this together. I find the fasten mate just makes it a bit simpler. So let's go ahead and use the fasten mate. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to click on this part here first, and it's going to bring this one over to this one. Now where I want to slot it together is along this edge here, either side of this edge. And it will be important to figure out which edge that you want to slide it onto. But right now, it doesn't really matter. You'll see once it comes together that if we've clicked on the wrong edge, we just need to select the other edge. But for now, because we haven't selected any of the edges, it's not going to matter too much. So let's select this edge. Now when I select the edge, I don't want to select the face like I'm doing here. That's actually selecting the face of the part. I want to select the actual edge. So if I move my mouse now, so it's just got just that edge there, and I'm going to click the very end of the edge, that one there. Click that one, and it is going to slot down and fit against this edge here, I believe. So these 2 edges will be touching, and those 2 points will be touching. Okay, now they're touching together, but they're actually not at the right angle, as you can see. So I'm actually going to turn it 90 degrees. You can see there they have slotted into each other. Okay, now you can see on this side there is a little bit of a gap just here. We've got that gap because when we print this in real life, there will be a gap there, and we need that gap so that the plywood will actually slide in against each other. But on the Onshape virtual platform, it's not going to make a difference because essentially these things have 0 thickness, so you can essentially make anything fit with anything. Now you can kind of see it's not quite down all the way. Okay, that's because of that tiny little radius in the corners there. It needs to sit just a little bit deeper than that. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and hit the offset here. And the offset allows us to move in any direction on the Z-axis, the Y, or the X-axis. We want to move on the Z-axis, and we're actually going to be moving, I think, in the opposite direction. You can see Z is straight up. We want to move down. So we're going to actually go ahead and make it, let's make it minus 4 mil. And you can see it's just moved that down a little bit. You can see now it looks like it is flush on the end there. Now at the moment it doesn't look quite right on the side here, and that's because these parts are actually made to lean in at about a 3 mil angle. So let's go ahead and hit the tick there, and let's move that. Before, when I move this one straight up, it actually needs to tilt inwards about 3 degrees. So I'm going to tilt it now, not 5 degrees, 3 degrees. Okay, and you would have noticed that when we actually set the angles before, they were at 87. The reciprocal of 87 on the right angle would be 3. Okay, so hit enter there. Alright, so now if I look at it from the edge, you can see it's not quite down all the way. I'm going to go back into that fasten. I'm going to make it, let's try minus 5 mil. Still not quite there. Let's make it minus 6 mil. That's too far. Let's make it minus 5.5. That seems about right. You can see the edge there, it's just poking out. Let's try minus 5.6. No, that's too much. Minus 5.55. Okay, that's pretty close now. I'm pretty happy with that. Alright, so that's close enough now that it's not going to make too much of a difference. I'm going to go ahead and hit the tick. And let's get started on our next part. So let's go ahead and move this one over. We're going to slot this one now into this position. Now that I've got these sort of in position, what I'm actually going to do is right click on this grey part, and I'm going to click the fix button. That's going to mean that it's not going to move in the space that I have it now. It's stuck in that position. So that means if I'm mating things together, everything moves to this one. And it also means that if there's something that's moving past another, they can't move unless I unfix this thing. Okay, so I do now, because I actually haven't got anything moving past each other, and I do want everything to come over to this part here, so that's why I've just fixed it in. Let's go ahead and get another fasten mate. Let's select, on this blue one, we want to select the right edge again. So let's select this edge at the very bottom of that edge, and then it should slot in against this edge, the very bottom of that edge. And again, we have to turn it. We need to flip it over actually. There we go. So the slots were actually at the top before. That's with this button here. The slots were at the top. I wanted to flip it over, so I hit the flip button and it flips it over so it's on the bottom. Now again, we need to make sure that this comes down, so we need to click the offset button. Let's click on the Z-axis, minus 5.55. And again, we know that from before, that's the correct size. Alright, last thing we need to do, or sorry, not last thing, second to last thing, we're going to go ahead and fasten mate this guy in position. So let's go ahead and let's go, let's see, this edge here should mate up with, let's see, I believe it would be this edge. Now again, like I said at the start, if you get these edges wrong, it's not the end of the world, you can change them. But I believe that edge should slot in and up against this edge here. Okay, now again, I need to rotate. Okay, let's just have a look. I believe that is correct. Now, I do need to make sure that this is offset again. Yep, it all looks correct. So let's go ahead and hit offset. Now for this one, I believe it's going to have, no, the Z-axis is going down this time, so I'm going to still have minus 5.55, and that's moved it up. Okay, and I hit the tick. Okay, so now we've got our base together, and it's all sitting nicely together. Last thing we want to do is actually fasten our lid on, so let's go ahead and move our lid up, about there. Now I'm going to use a fasten mate here. Again, you could use other mates, but I'm going to use the fasten mate. I'm going to use the fasten mate, and I'm going to select the very middle, no, actually not the very middle, one edge of the middle section of this little slot on the top. Okay, so this one here, I'm going to select that one, and it's going to slot onto the same point here on the top edge, right there. So you can see that edge there. Let's go ahead and slot that in. Okay, now, one problem we've got here is the angle, and that's because of that 87 degrees, because of that bend. So it's sitting there, it's actually at 90 degrees. We need to actually offset it. So we're going to offset that, and we're going to actually rotate on the Y-axis, I believe. It might be the, well, let's actually try the X-axis. So, and we need to change it by 3 degrees. Whoops, that's going in the other direction. Let's try -3. Okay, that looks better now. So you can see it's slotted into the top. Okay, I can go ahead and hit the tick on that one. I've rotated on the x-axis -3 degrees. So hit the tick, and you can see now it's slotted in nicely on that one. And we're just a little bit off here on that one, only by about 1 millimeter. And that is really just because of that distance, that tiny gap that I was talking about before. The tiny gap here that we need to have so that in reality when we cut these out of plywood, that those pieces actually slot together. That's the only reason why we have a tiny gap here. So if I was going to be really pedantic about this, I could try and change that little gap, and I would only try and do that by making sure that when I put the parts together on the side here, the gap here is on the outside edge and the gap here is on the outside edge, and that would make those parts pull together. But I'm not really too worried about it. You can see I've got the gap on the inside edge there. If we're really looking close, you can see the gap is on the inside, and the gap here is on the inside. You can't quite see it because it's grey in there just because of the angle I'm on. Whoops. But if we were really pedantic about it, we would make sure that that gap is on the outside edge, and that would mean that there would be no gap on the top here at all. So you can see that tiny little gap is just there because of that gap on the outside edge. So that's how we fit our stool together. One last thing we can do with this is we can actually add an exploded view. Let me go ahead and zoom out here. I can actually show how these slot together. So using an exploded view, I can add exploded view, can make this top moves up like so. Okay, and then I can also hit the tick there. I'm going to also show how these side panels, these blue ones, they slide up as well, making sure that they both slide up. Hit the tick there. I'm going to go back into that first one and make sure that top slides up a bit more. Let's go ahead and hit the tick. And then the next one, make it just slightly more. Okay, the tick, and you can see there, just if I exit that exploding view now, this is when it's all together. If I double click, that's how they all slide apart, and you can move and show how those ones are slotting into each other like so. Okay, so that might be cool if you're doing instructions on how to put it together. You might want to show an exploded view. So done. There's the exploded view, and that's the assembly. In the last video, I'll quickly show you how to do a drawing. That will be a very short video. Alright, that's all from me.